John Basarin, or Basarin OAM, and his talk today is going to be on the Gallipoli campaign from a Turkish perspective. Now, John has an extensive CV or bio and has been involved with several Bayside projects. He's a member of a number of the Bayside organisations, has written many articles, given radio interviews, appeared on national TV, and the subject he is passionate about, Gallipoli. He has also co-authored several books. His CV is so extensive I really couldn't put much more in than that. So would you give a warm welcome to our guest speaker.
Thank you, President David. What a beautiful view from here. I might admire that for a second. As that day comes, and I am always invited to several talks, so this is a topic that I have selected today because what happens in the Middle East today is something that goes back to Gallipoli, and I'll explain why. Just to judge my audience, how many of you have been to Gallipoli? I don't have to say anything. So many of you, my God. Okay, next question. How many of you have an ancestor who was in 1915 at Gallipoli? Quite a few. And how many, that's the last one, how many of your ancestors, well, do you have an ancestor that is still at Gallipoli? Can I hear what you have to say, sir? Who was it?
Rod Kelly is my name. My grandfather was, great-grandfather was killed there.
And do you know where he is buried?
No.
Well, come see me afterwards and I'll tell you. What I'm going to talk about today is based on my last book called Gallipoli, the Invasion. And my first book came out in 1985 when the Turkish side of the Gallipoli was not even discussed. But in 2015, Turkish side has become a mainstream. And we decided that we would call it the invasion because that's what it was. Okay, outline of my talk. I'll talk about the campaign itself, from the Turkish perspective, and then the Middle East campaign, which followed straight after the Gallipoli campaign, and then I'll talk about Royal Navy's move from coal to oil, and then there's a secret agreement called Sykes-Picot.
I'm not a caller.
I'm supposed to tell you not to turn it off. Okay. Just get a glass of water. Excuse me.
Definitely need that.
Okay. When you talk about that part of the world, you have to go back a couple of centuries. Although in Australia, Australia was discovered in 1776. That is a child's play for European countries. This is the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Turkish Empire in the 17th century, before Australia was discovered. As you can see, the empire had extended, which started in 1299, which extended to all of the Balkans, up to Vienna, all of Ukraine, Black Sea, and all the way to Middle East, and all of Northern Africa. And the capital was Istanbul, right there. Some of you might know it as Constantinople. And this is 17th century. And that is when the decline started. And it started losing all of its territories one by one. And in 1914, This is as much as the Turkish Empire had left all of the Middle East and Turkey today, the proper Turkey today, and of course you will understand why this map is important, because all of the Middle East, that obviously tells you a story. But in 1914, not many people knew the importance of the Middle East. Okay. Before Gallipoli, as I mentioned, Turkish Empire was going downhill, and they were not in any shape or form to take on a major war. And the population was quite poor, economy was in tatters, literacy rate was under 5%, and so they did not want war in Istanbul. So they sent delegation after delegation to Paris, to London, even to Moscow, and they were all rejected. So just before the war was declared in Europe on 2nd of August, they signed a secret agreement with Germany, and that was the only opportunity they had. And Turks were having good relationship with British Empire. Remember Crimean War in 1854, when French and British helped Turks to fight against the Russians. So during the rejuvenation period in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Britain was selected as the country that could help them with the Navy. And one of the things that they did was to ask for British to build 2 warships for them. And they were ready to be picked up. 1,000 sailors went to England to pick them up, but Churchill decided that just before the war, Turkey should not have any modern weapons like the warships. So war was declared on 4th of August. Now the warships was built with the money collected from the people, and it was badly regarded that the warships were confiscated and money was not returned. Very nifty. So Germany took the opportunity to give 2 warships to Turkey, and Britain thought that was not a fair go, so they blockaded the Dardanelles. Now look at the date, September 14, many months before what happened on Anzac Day. And on 29th of October, German warships went and bombarded Russian cities like Odessa, and Turkey was in war because Britain declared war against Turkey on 31st of October. And a week after, British captured the tip of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers where they come into the Straits of Hormuz. A town called Foa is a strategic one. British captured that on 6th of November and started marching towards Baghdad. Okay, so, and I will try to explain why that happened a bit later on. But just note that Britain actually started marching towards Baghdad long before Anzac Day. Okay, there are a lot of questions or answers to why Gallipoli took place. I mean, it is a forlorn place, and why would Britain and France and later on, of course, Anzacs attacked Gallipoli. A lot of discussion take place about this topic, and the major argument is that Britain wanted to open sea routes to Russia, it wanted to defend Suez Canal, defend route to India, and attack soft underbelly of Germany. And although some of them might have some relevance, I think the theory that I have is that the British were interested in capturing the rich oil fields of the Middle East. That's why they attacked Gallipoli, so they could capture Istanbul, the capital, and then divide up Turkey, and then have the Middle East for themselves. We will see later on that that's exactly what happened, but after Anzac, after Gallipoli. So, where's Gallipoli? Those of you who've been there, you know exactly where it is. And it is, Gallipoli is sort of key to the Straits of Dardanelles, which is then key to Istanbul, because if you cross here, you can ride across Istanbul and pretty well capture it. And big armada at the time, as you can see, it was only a mile across. Any ship passing through could be stopped quite easily. And on 18th of March, the biggest armada at the time, Royal Navy and French Armada, they attacked Dardanelles. The plan was to run through the Dardanelles and then go up to Istanbul and capture Istanbul and divide up the country. And biggest armada could not make it because they hit mines and they were bombarded by shore batteries. And they turned back at the end of 18th of March, which is a day still celebrated in Turkey. So Churchill, who was waiting in London, hoping that, yes, we're through, we're on our way to Istanbul, when he heard that they could not go through, he said, maybe we could not do it, unfortunately, we'll call in the army to help them. So they had to couple up forces ready for an attack. And if you recall, Australians and New Zealanders were in Egypt training. So they were brought together with the French and the British, and then 36 days later, they landed at Gallipoli. Now, Turkish authorities knew about all of that, and they were getting ready themselves. They knew what was happening, not because they had spies everywhere, but London tabloids were writing, we're going to go to Istanbul soon. And it happened. The invasion happened on 25th of April. That's an actual photograph from the day. As you can see, they're all milling around on the beach. Now, we have in Australia a phenomenon about all Anzacs died on the beach. No, that's not true. There were only 160 Turkish troops on the beach. And Australians and New Zealanders landed 8,000 troops in 4 hours on 20th of April. So any Turkish soldier who wasn't killed because none was captured, they all ran back up. And the real battle started on the ridges when later on Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who was commanding the 19th Turkish Division, came up through the high ground and captured the high ground before the Anzacs, and then pushed the Anzacs back to the line of Second Bridge, which then became the battleground for 8 months. So that's Anzac Corps, as you can see, and landing was easy, but going up those ravines and difficult valleys was not so easy. The aim was to capture the high ground here, but they somehow did not manage. So only about halfway through when they were met by the Turks, and that's when the major battles took place. And Anzacs were 8.5 months fighting in that difficult terrain. This is the route that he took with his 19th Division, going up to the high ground. This is the high ground. You can see his a big monument there. And this is a walk that I did with some friends. And this is the second route I was talking about, this one. On the seaside, it's full of trenches dug by Anzacs, and on the other side, it is the Turkish trenches. And at places, it is only about 10 yards apart. That's lawn pine, where that the trees are. And this is called the Monash Gully, this one here. And Turks had the high ground, and they could fire towards the trenches at any moment. And Turks tried to dislodge Anzacs from their trenches on 19th of May, and it was a disaster. And 3,000 Turks were killed in no man's land. And the battle was a stalemate, trench warfare, and neither side could do anything. And High Command decided in London that they would attack from the back of the high ground in August. An August offensive was undertaken, where landing of new fresh troops from England took place. And these troops landed here about 5 o'clock, but they were not given orders to march. And Turks were not expecting them to be there, and so they would have pretty well walked through, but orders were not given. So all the soldiers sat down and had a cup of tea. It was 5 p.m. And Atatürk again became the savior of the day, and in pitched battles for several days, the high part of the land was cleared of all Anzacs and British. That's him with his comrades, that one here. And these are the Turkish trenches at Lone Pine, which were captured by Anzacs, as you recall. And it was not of any importance because it was too far away from the high ground. And these are the Turkish troops, a motley crowd, and as you can see, somebody is having a haircut at the back there. And these are the wagons that carried supplies to the front, and it would take 7 days of traveling from Istanbul to Gallipoli. In November it snowed at Gallipoli, and heavy snow was first time seen by some Australians who came from like Western Australia or Queensland. And that became the turning point for the Anzacs to pull out, because there was no way they were going to go any forward. So on 20th of December 1915, all the troops left very early in the morning, and that was the most successful part of the campaign because nobody was killed. They all went in a surprise move. And Turks came out of the trenches, and there was nobody to fight, so they were all gone. And this is a photograph of the Turkish troops in Australian trenches. And but the war was very costly. This is in 1919 when they took over the area. As you can see, there's a mountain of skulls, which probably belong to Well, could be Aztecs, could be Turks. And the war was pretty costly. For Australians, it was nearly 9,000 killed. For Turks, it was 86,000 killed. But 86,000, 10 times as many, but because they were fighting the French and the British down south, plus they were being bombarded by the Royal Navy day and night. Okay, so it was a lot of young people from both sides who died. Okay, so what happened after Gallipoli? The Middle East became the main area of conflict between Turks and the British. And there is a history to Middle East. Ottoman Turks captured Damascus in 1516, Baghdad in 1534, and Basarin in 1546. And the whole of Arabic world of the Middle East became Turkish, under Turkish rule, and Sultan became Caliphate. So I mentioned that in 1914, that's what it was. And the Middle East campaign took 4 years to finish. And it was two major fronts, one in Egypt going up towards, if you remember your geography, towards Damascus, and the other one is towards Baghdad. And 2 million men fought each other, and half became casualties. And Ottomans capitulated 1918, 30th of October, just before 11th of November in Europe. And this is the two-pronged attack. One is from Palestine up towards Damascus in Syria, and the other one is up towards Baghdad and further. Okay, I did mention that campaign actually started in November 1914, and this is the capture of Foa, and then going up towards Baghdad. And that was all before Azak Day. These are the Turkish Camel Corps in 1916. The Turks had a major victory at Kut Lamara, which is south of Baghdad, and they captured 10,000 British troops, including their general. And Arabs were taken care of by the British gold. They were paid highly to revolt against the Turks. And this is an interesting quote from British High Commissioner to the Sheriff of Arabs, and the quote says, "In exchange of Arab support to British after the war is won, you will be the king from Egypt to Mesopotamia." So that was the promise made and held through, because sons of Faisal, the king, became rulers of Syria and then Iraq and Jordan. And Arab revolt has helped quite a bit to the British, because they were everywhere and they were behind the Turkish lines. And this is Turkish troops in 1917. Baghdad fell in 1917, and then there was a big breakthrough in Palestine, and Turks capitulated end of October 1918. And Damascus fell as well at the same time. So this is Turkish troops going back home after the war, and guess what? Istanbul was occupied on 13th of November. This is the Royal Navy moving into Istanbul and capturing the capital. I have to talk to you about the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the secret agreement it was, and French and British. Sykes refers to Mark Sykes, and Picot is the Frenchman. They agreed to divide the Middle East. Now, this is in 1916, before the war is actually finished. A is French area of influence, B is the English area of influence. And I will tell more about this agreement because it was pretty well impacted all over the Middle East afterwards. And Lawrence of Arabia, that we all know, has been quite helpful getting Arabic revolt to happen. And this is in Paris when Faisal and Lawrence all became part of the delegation to divide up the Middle East. Okay, so Istanbul was captured, and what happened? Turkey was divided. And Middle East was taken over, of course, as Sykes-Picot, but the rest of Turkey was also carved up. This is left for the Turks. Armenians were given the east, British in southeast, French in the south, Italians and Greeks, and Istanbul and other places became a compositely occupied area. And this was not acceptable to the Turkish people. So independence movement took place, and Atatürk, the hero at Gallipoli, became the commander of the troops fighting against, national troops fighting against the invaders. So the war of independence was very successful. All the troops, all the occupying forces were swept out of Turkey, and in 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne is a city in Switzerland, was signed, and that meant creation of Republic of Turkey that we know today. And this is the Republic of Turkey as we know. It is as big as New South Wales, and now there is about 85 million population. Okay, now the crux of the matter is the move of Royal Navy, move of Royal Navy from coal to oil. Okay, it was a sailing ship century and after century, and then suddenly steam became an important mover of ships, and they quickly moved from sail to steam. And of course, Britain had great coal, and the best coal that was available, and that made British Royal Navy so powerful that it became the ruler of the seas. Oil was found in the USA in 1859, and they started running boilers on oil, but it was not all that safe to start with, and oil was very expensive. But Royal Navy had to move from coal to oil because German Navy was moving across, but only oil available was in USA and Russia. And when Churchill became the first Lord of the Admiralty in 1911, he was very much in favor of moving across to oil. But there was no oil in the British Empire. That's him, a young, dashing Churchill. And why did they want to move from coal to oil? Several reasons. They could go far, they could go faster, they could easily refuel, they could carry more armaments, and they needed less personnel to operate. And Royal Navy was determined to be the ruler of the seas, so they ordered, Churchill ordered warships based on oil, and that put a lot of demand on oil. And there was, that was not at all secret. Churchill said in 1913 to the Parliament, we must have oil because there is none in the British Empire. And if we don't have oil, Royal Navy will not be able to rule the seas. And at the time, in 1914, British Empire had very little oil, so did French or German, and guess what? Ottoman Empire had a lot of oil in the Middle East. Now you might say, did they know about the oil? Yes, they did, because oil was gushing out at times from some of the locations in the Middle East. Even Greeks knew about it. Okay, now Germans also needed oil, and they chose a different way of approaching the problem. They offered a railway from Berlin to Baghdad to the Turks, and they said, in return, we don't want money, we want mineral rights where the train line goes. And guess what? The train line went through all the known oil fields. Okay, I'll go over this one quite quickly. So Anglo-Persian Oil Company was established, and then it was running a big refinery in Persia, and Navy became part of the owners, one of the owners of the refinery. And then Turkish Petroleum Company was established with the British and German interest, but of course everything had to stop in 1914. And then Turkish Petroleum Company was taken over by the British and turned into Iraqi Petroleum Company, and search for oil began in 1927, and the biggest oil field called Baba Bulgur was discovered, which is still producing oil today. It was one of the biggest discoveries in the world. And Americans got into the act as well, so they became part of the concession holders, and they signed an agreement for 75 years with Iraq to exploit oil. So these are the oil fields of Iraq today. As you can see, it is quite wealthy. And Middle East was made up of different ethnic groups, different religions, and when Sykes-Picot drew the lines of borders, they had no interest in caring for that background. And Mark Sykes made a point of saying, I want to draw straight lines, I don't want to mug around. So this is what resulted in drawing up the Middle East. As you can see, straight lines everywhere. They decided, of course, to create countries according to their strategic approach to the region. Israel wasn't there at the time, which will become a bit later. So this is a border line, as you can see, it's just and they created Kuwait. So it's all made up countries. There was a Jewish interest in the Middle East for the Jews to go back to the Middle East and create their own. And in 1917, British declared that through a Balfour Declaration, that there would be land given to the Jewish people, but it didn't happen in 1917. It would happen later after the Second World War, as you all know. So let's go back to famous Sykes-Picot, and if you look at this line here, look at this line here, and look at this line here. Exactly the same. It changed at the top because British decided that there was more oil on the other side of the line, so they took over that part, and the French were quite upset about that. Okay, I did mention oil fields, and this is a recent photograph. So there are a lot of oil fields, and the border was Turkish and Iraqi border was drawn so that there was no oil on the Turkish side. How clever is that? And this is another part of the oil fields in Syria, which is now protected by American forces. Okay, oil wealth, of course, is very important And modern societies cannot run their economies without oil. And Middle East is still the top producer. If you look at the top 5, they're all Middle Eastern countries. So it is still relevant in terms of oil wealth and the safety of economies around the world. And they made a lot of money from going back to many decades. They made a lot of money. And that's my conclusion. And I'm ready for any questions you might have. Maybe this was a bit different way of explaining what happened. There's a question.
I was just asking, when they sent delegations to Paris and London and Moscow before the war, what were they actually trying to achieve? I know they were rejected.
Okay, they were trying to sign non-aggression pacts, which meant that I will not attack you, you will not attack me. But of course, at the time, at the secret quarters of London, they were designing how to attack Ottoman Empire and divide it up. And they're not going to sign a non-aggression pact because their plans are hatched already to capture Middle East oil.
Gentlemen, more questions?
At what point did the British give up Saudi Arabia to the Americans and the formation of Aramco?
Good question. When British took over Middle East, big American companies were sort of salivating in the mouth saying, oh, we want to be part of that. A lot of discussions happened behind the scenes, and big 5 American companies then became part of the exploiting companies. And more, as I said, oil was first found in north of Iraq, and then gradually came south. By the time it came to Saudi Arabia, it was early 1930s. And American big oil companies muscled British and French companies out of the picture and took over even bigger wealth in Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
My question is nothing to do with Gallipoli.
Yeah.
But why did Atatürk anglicize the language after the war?
Atatürk was a
Instead
great,
of adopting
yeah,
the Arabic language.
yeah. Atatürk was a great reformer and revolutionary, if you like. Ottoman Empire was a feudal empire. It had values and policies that were all Middle East and Middle Age based. So Atatürk wanted to bring new Republic of Turkey to the Middle Age, from the Middle Ages to the new era. So he had something like 100 reforms. That included change of the writing of the Turkish language in Arabic. It was made into Latin in 1928 because, for main reasons. One, the world was using Latin alphabet, so writing it in Arabic format was really not the kosher thing to do. Plus, Turkish language is suited to Latin alphabet rather than Arabic alphabet. I can go into the details, but that made learning Turkish much quicker, much easier. Remember, it was only 5% literacy rate in 1914? Well, within 10 years of changing the alphabet, the literacy rate up to 50%, went up to 50%. It is now, of course, nearly 100%, but that change from Arabic alphabet, which was very difficult, to Latin, made that literacy rate to go up tenfold in 10 years.
Roger?
How are you, John?
Roger the Dutcher.
You're
Yes,
well.
mate.
You're a very hard worker for this, for what you do. My question is moving forward to today.
Yes, good question.
What's happening, in your opinion, with Iran now coming in
Yes.
to the conflict,
Yes.
and of course Israel trying to survive and the Hamas
Yes.
started the war, this current war.
Yes, yes.
But now Iran's there. What do you think's going to happen?
Okay. That's a loaded question, and I answer with it's probably partially true.
Very current.
Yeah, very current. Well, I did mention that huge amount of effort was spent by the West to capture oil fields. They could not capture Iran because Iran was much more difficult terrain and much more sort of group of people to capture. So, but they changed the Iranian rulers to ones that were in favor of the West, like a man called Shah of Iran was very much in favor of working together with the West. And but when mullahs took over in 1970s, then they became totally the opposite. They hated America, they hated Israel, and they since have been working how to eradicate their influence in Iran and in the Middle East. And one of the great efforts they put is nuclear armaments. And I follow the Turkish television sometimes, and they have much more robust and learned discussions. In Australia, we have a bit more shallower approach because we don't understand some of the intricacies in the Middle East. So the general thinking, even months before, was that Israel's real aim was to get rid of Iran's nuclear capability. Because if nuclear bombs were dropped on Israel, that would be the end of Israel. And that was seen as one of the catastrophes that they did not want to have. So Gaza, Palestine, was the starter of the whole strategy to bring Israel into the conflict. They wanted to, according to those sources I'm listening, they wanted to Gaza to be Israel at the end of the day, take all the Palestinians out of Gaza, because they have rich oil and gas reserves in the sea of Gaza. So that's one aspect. But the real aim of Israel is to get rid of Iran's nuclear potential. So the thinking is that Iran will come into the war, which is happening as we see, and then there will be some sort of formulation to attack Iran to get rid of the nuclear capability. I understand that Iran's nuclear factories are all 20 meters underground, so normal bombing will not do any harm. So they have to use tactical nuclear weapon to get rid of it. So the escalation will be such that it will be justified, just like Hamas attacked and killed over 1,000 Israeli people, that justified Israel's attack on Gaza and Palestine. Now the scenario is unfolding to attack Iran with a tactical nuclear weapon to get rid of its capability totally, so it will not be a threat to Israel and to the Western interest. That's a bit loaded.
A supplementary question.
Yeah.
Margaret and I had a wonderful trip through Turkey. I've said to people, before you die, you've got to go to Turkey because there's so much to see.
Yeah.
Where does Turkey stand in this situation?
Turkey is a member of NATO, so its hands are bound to work with NATO. So it is part of the Western Alliance, and it will stay that way. So there's nothing changing in Turkey's mutual stance.
So if the war escalates, will
Yeah.
Turkey get involved?
No.
No.
Yeah.
One more over here. Oh, we'll do two. One over there and one at you first.
So, what is the story behind the theory that the landing at Anzac Cove was in fact a mistake and that they should have landed further down the beach?
Okay, well, that's another question that is quite relevant. Anzac Cove is selected after they've made the decision to land at a more southerly area, but that area it's called Kabatepe, and that area was very suitable for landing. It had a nice beach, long beach, and flat land to run through, but Ottoman Turks also knew that was a landing place that would be favored by the British. So they fortified that area quite well. They had cannons, they had machine guns, they had 1,000 troops in the back, and Australians the planners, Australian planners, could see what could be seen from the sea, going up and down the sea. But the person who was in charge of planning of the landing, he took a flight over the land to see what was actually behind the hills. So he discovered pretty well that Anzac Cove was not defended at all. He could see that there were no cannons, no troops to speak of, whereas the other part was heavily defended. So he changed the landing from Kabatepe to Anzac Cove, so that the landing would not be at all opposed, which actually became the case.
Thank you.
One more over here.
John, I've got a follow-up question from Rogers, and your reply.
Yeah.
What about the Americans?
I think the answer is quite clear. Americans need to protect their interests in the Middle East, and they need to protect Israel, and they have the tactical nuclear weapons. So I think it'll be, and in 6 months' time, maybe a year's time, you will be able to judge it whether what I'm saying is has any merit or not. Americans will use tactical nuclear weapons.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Can I also call upon Chris for the vote of thanks? There he is as well. And then we'll show our appreciation for you all for that. Thank you very much. And just before Chris goes, John will be staying for lunch, so we've got time before lunch. If anyone wants to have a talk to him while he circulates around, you're welcome to.
There's one other thing. I have 2005 Gallipoli Anzac Cove ceremonies booklet that I want to offer to people if they're interested. It's only $20, and there's no other copy in Australia, so you'll be having a unique source if you wanted to. And the funds go to Friends of Gallipoli that I'm the chairman of.
Well,
Later.
well, John, thank you very much for a very wide presentation to us, covering Gallipoli and the role of Kemal Ataturk in the 1930 division to defending their own country to defeat the invaders, to the history of the Middle East, and you touched on the Sykes-Picot secret agreement. Here's two imperial powers splitting up country which is not theirs, but then you had the McMahon-Hussein agreement. We're promising, with the support of the Arabs against the Turks, that Britain would support the Arab establishment of an Arab nation in Palestine, and then you had the Balfour Declaration doing the exact opposite. So all these promises the British made were the genesis of the problem we've got today. We might also say that in 1900, the Jewish population of Palestine was only 5%. So we have the genesis of today's problems. I mean, it's said that most of the problems of the world are due to the fact that the British were very poor map drawers, and when they split up Mesopotamia, I mean, they made a bit of a mess of that. You showed us some of that. But, you know, if you had created a Kurdish state, it would have saved a lot of problems in relation to Turkey and Kurdish people. So, very interesting. In many ways, you scratched the surface of this history, and we'd like to thank you very much. Now, I have to say, it is traditional at this club that the speaker is rewarded with a fine bottle of red wine. However, there is a failure in administration and we have no bottle of red wine, but we will get one to you. So we promise you that, and we thank you very much. If we can